Are there things that Christians should know? Absolutely. Of course, they're not things that they want to know because they're just looking for comfort and they're positively terrified of the facts. However, everyone ought to know the facts and care if what they believe is in accordance with objective reality. The world would be a whole lot better place if that was true. Unfortunately, we get this coming up next. Welcome back to another question, or two maybe, from Alisa Childers, who, let's be honest, isn't any better than any of the other conmen and shysters that we look at around here. I don't do her a lot because, well, I don't really know why. She just doesn't show up in my recommended videos very often, and judging from this video, that's probably a good thing. She seems to be riding around on the coattails of other apologists who are a lot more successful than she is, and that's not necessarily something to be proud of. Being even more crooked and stupid isn't something to which you should aspire. So let's get back to it and see what's what.
Question number 2. Is there any evidence that the resurrection of Jesus actually happened?
Nope, none at all. You've got claims in a book of mythology and stuff that people believed, but that's not evidence. Those are claims, and claims can never be evidence. Claims need to be confirmed with evidence, things that fundamentally corroborate the claims being made, and there is none of that for Jesus at all. Now, you might say that means we have to reject a lot of things in history as unsupported. And, yeah, so what? I'm entirely fine with that. Note that I'm not saying they didn't happen. I have no reason whatsoever to think that they did. Most of history is just stories. You might like the stories, you might hate the stories, but that doesn't make the stories true. Those stories are justified, at least to some degree or another, and I apportion my beliefs to the evidence provided, and where I actually care about the story at all, which isn't a lot of the time, because most of the time I just don't, but where I actually care, I am looking for that corroboratory evidence that supports the story being told. Mostly, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, but mostly, history doesn't matter much at all. I'm not as concerned with how we got here as I am that we're actually here right now. And I know that pisses a lot of people off.
So, esteemed historian and New Testament scholar Gary Habermas collected over 1,400 of the most critical scholarly works written between 1975 and 2003 about the resurrection of Jesus.
And I think we all know just how little I think of Gary Habermas. His minimal facts keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. He started out with 12, I think he's down to 6 right now, and for most of it, I think it isn't actually defensible. We've talked about that around here before, but I don't care what anybody says they accept. I care what evidence they can present in support of it, and even secular scholars who say they believe that Jesus existed or was crucified or whatever, I don't give a damn about their beliefs. I care only about their evidence, and they have no more than the religious do. In fact, I don't think most of them actually take a strong belief that Jesus was real. It's a for the sake of argument and if I don't agree, the religious won't talk to me anymore thing. And that's not impressive either. I am consistent across the board on this. If some random scientists say, well, I believe gravity exists, I'm going to ask to see their evidence, just like I will for anything else. Now, the evidence for gravity is obvious and pretty easy to come up with, and I'd probably only do that if they took a strange position on it, but I don't accept the consensus without seeing how they got to the position rationally and evidentially. So, not at all impressed. Don't let your egos get in the way of the actual facts, which, sadly, I think an awful lot of people out there do.
These works ranged from the ultra-liberal to the far-right conservative, and he discovered that virtually every scholar agreed on several points surrounding the resurrection of Jesus.
And those points have been getting less and less and less as time has gone on. I'd love to get all those people in a room together and actually grill them for their evidence, because they don't have any. I think that would probably be fun. Not beliefs, not faith, evidence, and nothing more. You could sell it to pay-per-view, if that's even still a thing. I'm pretty sure it is, although I don't really care. Because I think the one thing that would come out of it is the fact that nobody has any actual evidence. Objective, verifiable evidence that we can all examine and determine what actually happened based on the facts and not your fifis, not your faith. There is no real way to do that with Jesus. Just because some guy existing is a mundane claim, that doesn't make it a verifiable claim. And it's the verifiability that I care about, not your intellectual laziness and your emotional biases.
Here are 4 of them. Number 1, that Jesus died by Roman crucifixion.
We don't know that. No records of any Jesus being crucified actually exist. Now, sure, you can say it's a mundane claim because we know that the Romans did indeed crucify people, but that's not the claim being examined, is it? We're asking if this very specific person in history was nailed up on a cross or a stake or whatever, depends on how you look at it, and that requires verifiable evidence, not, well, it could have been. Could have been is not did. I'm asking for the did, not the could have been. I'm perfectly fine saying, I don't know, prove it to me, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It doesn't bother me one bit, but yeah, it bugs the hell out of a lot of people.
Number 2, that Jesus' disciples believed he rose from the dead and appeared to them and were willing to suffer and die for these beliefs.
You don't have any evidence for at least most of the disciples. I don't know that they really ever existed at all. We have no direct, demonstrable, independently verifiable evidence for any of it. And their supposed deaths are mostly just church traditions. Granted, they all died if they ever existed, but how they died, that we don't really know for sure. Now, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, if these people were real or not. There are plenty of letters by early church fathers that claim they knew or claim they saw the disciples, but that's still just a claim, and there's plenty of reasons to lie to confirm validity on their own claims, and we have no external evidence that any of it is actually true. But even if it all is, let's just give them that for a moment, that doesn't prove that Jesus was God. It proves only that they believed that Jesus was God. Belief doesn't mean truth. 19 Muslims flew planes into buildings on 9/11. Would they die for a lie? Christians would have to say yes if they were at all consistent. I'm just turning it back on them. We have pictures of Buddhist monks who light themselves on fire in protest. That's one of the more horrific deaths that you can have. Would they die for a lie? I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of cases like this. Even if the disciples of Jesus martyred themselves, that doesn't mean that their beliefs were true. People can be convinced for really, really bad reasons that have nothing whatsoever to do with factual reality. So this doesn't mean a damn thing.
Number 3, that the church persecutor Paul suddenly became a Christian after having an experience that he believed was the risen Jesus.
There's that belief thing again, right? Beliefs don't matter. Now, we have no external information about Saul before his conversion. Just about everything we have is just assumption and invention. However, as I said before, none of that actually matters because beliefs are irrelevant. There's no way to verify what, if anything, actually happened. We don't have any independent accounts of the experience, even from any of his guards or companions or whatever, who wrote down, well, he just started flailing around on the ground and I saw it all happen. Nobody did that. We have to trust that Paul, as he later became known, wrote things down accurately, and I just don't trust people without external support. Sorry. This is a huge claim, and the bigger the claim, the more substantial the evidence to support it has to be. And we have none. Color me not at all impressed.
Number 4, the brother of Jesus and famously skeptical James was suddenly converted after he believed he had seen the risen Jesus.
Which still doesn't prove it happened. These same objections apply here. I'm not interested in what people believe. I'm interested in what you can independently and objectively prove is true. And in none of these cases can you back up any of it independently. James claiming to see Jesus means no more to me than the guy who thought he saw Elvis boarding a train on the day that he was buried. That doesn't prove that Elvis was still alive, any more than any believed experiences prove that Jesus came back from the dead. People make mistakes. People lie. People have hallucinations. That's why we can't just trust the word of people who said they saw a thing when it comes to these big ticket items. We need more, and there simply isn't any.
Habermas also noted that somewhere around 75% of scholars also agree that Jesus' tomb was found empty.
That's a story. Now, how would you verify that? If the tomb is empty, how do you know that it actually belonged to Jesus once upon a time? This is more church tradition, backed up by absolutely nothing but blind faith. It's not like we have a verifiable inscription. Here lies Jesus, the Son of God. You'd need something like that to back it up, and you'd actually need more to back up that inscription, since anybody can just invent things out of whole cloth, just like they did with the Shroud of Turin. You need solid, verifiable evidence for this stuff, and you just don't have any. So, no, I'm not impressed.
The best explanation of these minimal facts is that Jesus was, in fact, resurrected from the dead.
Not remotely close. That's just jumping to the conclusion that you really wish was true without having any evidence to back you up. I don't care what you wish. I care what you can demonstrate, and you can't demonstrate a damn thing. This is why we have problems. But it says so in a book that I like. That doesn't mean anything. I'm not interested in your feelings. I'm interested in your facts. If someone really liked the idea that Abraham Lincoln was a vampire hunter, that doesn't make it true. That's why we need more than your faith and your fee-fees. Because people are far too willing to leap to unsupported conclusions for things that they are emotionally invested in. But that doesn't make any of it true, and it's the truth that actually matters.
If you want to learn more about the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, I recommend a book called The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus by Michael Licona and Gary Habermas.
Two people who have both signed statements of faith that require them to agree with everything it says in the Bible, otherwise they lose their jobs. Yeah, that's not exactly impressive, is it? People who actually care about the truth don't sign binding agreements not to say anything else. So fuck both of those idiots. I have no interest in either one. And I've read that book. I just went looking for it on my bookshelves, but I can't find it. I don't know where it went. It's probably in a box someplace. We just put in a nice new tankless water heater because the old one broke, and we had to box up a whole bunch of stuff to get it out of the way so they could install the new one. So things are kind of in a little bit of disarray at the moment, sorry. But I was not impressed when I read it. It spent the whole thing from, at least what I remember anyhow, starting with the preconception that everything they believed was true, and then cherry-picking evidence that got them where they wanted to go. Maybe I'll just have to hunt around and read through it again. I don't know. It's got to be here someplace. Assuming I can ever find it again, or have time to do so, which is in pretty short supply, so whatever.
If you want to go a little deeper, you can pick up N.T. Wright's The Resurrection of the Son of God. This brings us to question number 3. Has science disproved God?
Science doesn't have to. This is a point that I've made to the religious all the time. It's not our job to prove you wrong. It's your job to prove yourself right. The burden of proof is entirely on your shoulders, and as we all know, they're not even trying to demonstrate anything rationally or evidentially. It's not our job to prove anything. It's yours. Maybe get to work. Granted, they won't because they can't, because they've got absolutely nothing but fifis and faith. The second any of the theists who show up in the comments hear that I don't care about their emotions, they tend to get mad, and this is a pretty consistent thing. But I like it doesn't mean a damn thing. You have to do better than that. You have to be able to prove it, not just like it. At least try.
Scientists study the material world, and by definition, God is not material.
That's the problem right there. You have no way of actually knowing what God is like because you have no means whatsoever to study your God objectively and independently. The only way to determine what something is like is by having that thing available for examination. Otherwise, whatever you come up with in your head is just made up. You can't say that your God is immaterial if you can't prove that your God is immaterial. How do you prove that your God is immaterial without having your God here to look at and see what it's actually like? Just because you really like the idea, that doesn't mean your idea is true. This is why the religious make such ludicrous fools of themselves all the time, because this is kind of how they are. You don't just get to define reality into existence. You have to be able to study it and then describe what it is that you see. And the religious, they don't see anything. That's the whole problem. They are just imagining how they really wish their gods were, but that doesn't mean anything because they don't know what they're actually like. They don't know if they're actually real. How do you know that your God is immaterial? What evidence can you present to show that that's actually true? And the answer, of course, is that they've got nothing but wishes and dreams, and that's why these people are such pathetic, laughable idiots. They really are that dumb.
In fact, the statement, God does not exist, is not actually a statement of science. It's a philosophical statement. It can't be proven in a lab.
You're not going to find an awful lot of atheists saying that, are you? You will find a ton of theists saying exactly the opposite, though. This is just misusing philosophy, which is why it's so useless for anything that is supposedly real. It's great for concepts. It's crap for actual things. That's why I, at least, say I don't believe in your God, or more properly, I don't have a good reason to believe that your God is real. I don't make positive statements that I can't back up with objective evidence, and neither should they. Neither should anyone. But they are so completely deluded that they don't understand where it is that they're going wrong. Of course, trying to explain where they're in error, that doesn't go anywhere either, does it? Because they just don't care. That's the problem. They just don't care. I'm trying to deal with objective reality. I am trying to understand to the best of my ability what is actually going on, what is out there outside of my head. They aren't trying to do that at all. They use God like a security blanket. They only care about feeling good, whereas I care about being objectively correct, at least as much as I can be. We are not even talking the same language, and we're certainly not after the same goals. Atheists, by and large at least in a lot of things, at least in some things, are rational, and the religious simply are not.
So, in order for scientists to assert that God does not exist, they have to filter their evidence through the philosophical lens of materialism.
Scientists don't say that. I've never seen a single scientist ever say that. So this, like most other things that come out of the mouths of the religious, is just a lie. Big surprise there. But this whole materialism thing is just another dodge used by the terminally deluded. We don't assume that the material is all that exists. We just have no evidence for anything else, and we go where the evidence leads. We can prove the material is there with a couple of obvious caveats, and the religious are just pulling their beliefs out of their asses, no evidence provided at all. One is rational, the other is not. That's why they have to keep pretending that we, the rational non-religious, have just as much faith as they do, but that's simply not true. We have no faith at all. We have no need for any faith at all. We are not making any non-verifiable claims like they are. We simply report what we see, and they report what makes them happy, what they can produce no evidence for in any way, shape, or form, and that is just dumb. Tell me which side you think is most worthwhile down in the comments, because I'll be really, really surprised if the religious side gets even a single vote.
Which excludes the possibility of anything outside the material realm.
No, it doesn't. Another lie on the part of the religious. This is why they have to cast it the way that they do. They are trying to project their faith onto others when that is simply not the case. We are perfectly willing to accept the supernatural the moment that the religious can properly define it and show that it actually exists in some objective way. And they're not even trying to do that, are they? How did they get there? Who the hell knows? They just really like the idea, but that doesn't show that it's actually there. They are the ones making the claims. It rests, therefore, entirely on their shoulders to back it up, and as I keep saying, they're not even trying to do that. They just assume that it's just gotta be there because, well, their book says a thing. Well, it sounds good to me. But those are not rational ways of evaluating reality, are they? They're just not. You can't just play make-believe and say, see, I was right all along, if you can't produce any objectively verifiable evidence whatsoever that you were actually factually correct. This is just the mind poison that is faith. Faith doesn't get you anywhere demonstrable. It doesn't get you anywhere useful. It just eats at your brain until it's just dribbling out your ears. This is just wishful thinking through and through. Yet, what else do they actually have? Nothing. Nothing at all. That's why they look like such ridiculous dumbasses. Because they are.
Frank Turek offers this illustration in his book, Stealing from God.
And Frank Turek is just an idiot. Frank is a con man, just like all the other apologists are. At least, I've never seen one that wasn't, at least not one that was popular. It's always people with their hands out for your money, lying for the Lord, because they've got nothing else of substance to do. If you look at the fast-talking con men in any other field and compare them head-to-head to people like Frank Turek or William Lane Craig or people like that, they all look pretty much identical, don't they? No evidence, lots of claims, lots of emotional rhetoric meant to appeal to people's feelings, nothing of any real substance to back it up, just, you have to believe and give me your money. So, offering up Frank Turek as a representative, that's not going to help your case, Alisa. It just makes you look just as dumb and dishonest as he is. And that's not exactly a surprise either, is it?
Quote, to say that a scientist can disprove the existence of God is like saying a mechanic can disprove the existence of Henry Ford. It doesn't follow.
Except Henry Ford demonstrably existed. We've got pictures of the guy. You have not established that with any gods. So you've got the lie that scientists are trying to disprove God, which is simply not true. And then one of the worst examples I can think of, since Henry Ford left behind tons of evidence for his own existence. What has God demonstrably left behind? And I mean realistically, with something that you can show, not just what you really wish was true. Absolutely nothing. This is why these people look so stupid. Anybody with two brain cells to rub together ought to be able to see the inherent failure in the analogy, but this is the religious we're talking about, and they're not all that interested in the actual facts, are they? They just really want to believe. Really wanting to believe doesn't get you to demonstrable truth, though. And since they aren't remotely interested in anything but their own emotional comfort and their own wishes and dreams and their own blind faith, we're left with no other alternative than to call these people what they actually seem to be. Complete idiots, immature children who refuse to grow up, clueless morons. Take your pick. This is not going to change until they have something of substance to say and something demonstrable to back it up. But I wouldn't be holding my breath on any of that, would you?
If you want to learn more about this question, I recommend a book called Has Science Buried God by John Lennox.
Another demonstrable moron. Come on, Alisa, you have to be able to up your game. Now, maybe this would appeal to people who don't have the experience that we've got around here, dealing with these clueless liars day after day after day. But we do, and we've got to go with what we know, right? I hope Lennox is a better mathematician than he is a critical thinker, because otherwise, well, I guess we know why he's doing apologetics now, right? It's like wondering why that lying sack of excrement J. Warner Wallace isn't still a crime scene investigator. Because he's shit and apologetics doesn't require any great mental faculties, just a decent stage presence and a lack of intellectual integrity and the ability to just lie to people for a buck. And maybe that explains a lot, doesn't it?
You can also check out reasons.org and discovery.org.
Two crap websites aimed at the terminally gullible that lie constantly because they don't care about the truth. This is not at all impressive, sorry. Then again, it wasn't really meant to be, was it? It's not meant to appeal to the non-religious thinker. They don't want people who think. They want people who feel. And sorry, that kind of thing is largely going away in the modern world. Not enough, granted, but at least it's driving religion out of business, and that is certainly a good thing. To be really honest, I thought we'd get farther this time. This third question was the shortest of the bunch, and I guess thanks to whoever puts up Alisa Childers videos for marketing, each question is clearly in the timeline so I could see exactly what we were getting into, but it wound up being one of the dumbest questions so far, and therefore I had a lot to respond to. I'm also trying not to cut in the middle of questions, and the next two questions are both pretty long, so I guess we're going to have to see just how that goes. I had planned on wrapping this up in 3, but I think it's probably going to go 4. Blame it on the utter stupidity of the religious and their empty claims and lack of honesty, because they really ought to know better, shouldn't they? All of them should. Too bad none of them do, though, or at least that none of them are honest enough to admit it. Seriously, I couldn't go out there and just lie to people for a living, and if these people really believe it, which I figure at least some of them actually do, then I couldn't be as stupid as they are if I tried. So we'll pick this up again with question 4 next week, but I don't think it's going to be any more intelligent, but I guess we'll have to see. These are not things that Christians should know. Christians ought to know better. Christians shouldn't be so easily misled. The fact that they are, that just proves just how dumb Christians and Christianity really are. And that's hardly a surprise to anyone with a brain, is it?